Welcome to the Heritage Minute Special Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Simon. Today, I have the honor of speaking with General Retired Steve Lorenz, a proud member of the illustrious class of 73. The General has led at multiple levels in the Air Force, including as USAFA's Commandant of Cadets and as Commander, Air Education and Training Command. Since his retirement from active duty, he has led 2 Academy-related nonprofits. Today, we will talk to him about his fascinating career and experiences, and we'll touch on some history and heritage as well. General Lorenz, welcome to the program.
It's an honor and a privilege to be here, Steve, especially with the great stuff you do for the podcasts and for the minutes, because you've done such a great thing for our history of our Air Force Academy. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me. Let's start by looking back at the late 1960s, a tumultuous time in our nation's history. How did you decide to attend the Air Force Academy?
Well, I'm very blessed that I'm third generation Air Force. My grandfather dropped bombs on the battleship Ostfriesland with Billy Mitchell, and my father served for 33 years and flew combat in Korea and Vietnam. In 1960, he was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base, and for some reason, he took 9-year-old Steve Lorenz down to visit the brand new Air Force Academy. And for some reason, I just decided right then and there, this is where I would have liked to go to school. And during that tenure, I went to 12 different schools, 4 different high schools. Yes, that's right, 4 different high schools. And I applied to the Air Force Academy. I lived in Washington, D.C., and I was blessed that I got an appointment to come to the Academy and become a member of the illustrious class of 1973. And that's how I got to the Academy. And it was a dream come true. The one thing that was different is that all of my classmates were looking forward to being an officer. And when I was 9 years old, I decided my goal in life was to be a cadet. And so they would count the days down to graduation. And I became depressed because I had already achieved my life goal of becoming a cadet at the Air Force Academy.
Where do you go from there? So,
yes.
Any significant memories of your cadet days?
Oh, without a doubt. Because I went to those 12 schools, I really wasn't prepared, especially in the math and science areas. And as I like to say, I liked aeronautical engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science so much, I took them twice. And I was on the dean's other list 6 of 8 semesters. And it wasn't because I didn't try. I worked very, very hard. There are 2 magic letters that got me through the school and get all of us through school. EI, 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 extra instruction. And that's what got me through here, as did the faculty and the great AOCs, my fellow classmates, the other cadets in the thing. It was just it was a challenging time, but I made it, and it taught me many, many great things. But the greatest thing is never, ever, ever give up.
Good lesson. So I first met you. You were here at as the Commandant of Cadets. I was on the Secretary of the Air Force's staff in Washington, D.C. What were some of your career highlights before your stint as the Commandant?
Well, as with in those days, 85% of my class went to pilot training. So I went down to Selma, Alabama, Craig Air Force Base, and went through pilot training. And I wanted to fly RF-4s. They were fast and low to the ground. I thought that'd be neat. But I ended up getting a KC-135 to Ellsworth Air Force Base, Rapid City, South Dakota. I didn't even know where it was. And as I like to say, 135's been very, very good to me. I spent almost 5 years at Ellsworth flying. I converted to EC-135s in the 4th Airborne Command and Control Squadron, upgraded to aircraft commander, learned a lot, met a lot of neat people. And then out of the blue, a computer, Z100 in those days, kicked my name out, and I was interviewed to be the aide to the commander of Air Force Logistics Command, a gentleman named General Bryce Plow, class of 1946 at West Point. I had never met him, never seen him. I went for the interview. I got hired. So I got to spend 2 years being an aide, and I ended up being an aide to 2 4-star generals. The other one, when General Poe retired, was General James P. Mullins, who I just visited last week, and he's 96 years old. And then we went off, and they sent me, not because I wanted to go, to be to Air Force Legislative Liaison in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. And so I spent 4 years there. I learned a lot. I was an inquiries division. Then I was executive officer to the director of L&L. And then I ended up spending 3 years in the Senate liaison office. So I had before I became that. And then after that, I worked my way up and got a squadron command before I became commandant. And then I ended up being a group commander, also 22 months on the joint staff, and after going to National War College. And then I ended up being the wing commander of March Air Force Base in Riverside, California, and McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. And then they decided to send me here to be commandant.
Okay. And you had a very successful term as commandant. What were some highlights of that time period for you?
Well, I was very, very blessed to work for two great bosses, Lieutenant General Paul Stein, 66, who's passed away, but he was a great boss, and then Lieutenant General Tad Olstrom, class of 65, both great bosses. And I worked with a great dean and a great director of athletics. And then the other thing is I got to hang out with 4,000 raging hormonal teenagers, and from the class of 97 to the class of 2002. And it was wonderful to hang out with them. I got to spend a lot of time with them and mentor them and help them graduate. And the funny thing is those ladies and gentlemen are now colonels, generals, and retired. It makes me feel so old.
Scary, isn't it?
Yes.
So like most commandants, you went on to do even more great things in the Air Force after leaving USAFA. But unlike most former commandants, you made it to 4-star rank. So what were some of your jobs and how did you progress?
Well, I was blessed. I always say that the military, and specifically the Air Force, lets ordinary people do extraordinary things. And so after I left here, I became the Director of Plans and Programs at the United States Air Forces in Europe at Ramstein Air Base. Got to work for a lot of great people and with a lot of great people. Then, I'll never forget this, my then boss, General Speedy Martin, class of 1970, okay, a great American. He called me in one day and said, Lorenz, tomorrow they're going to announce that you're going to be the Air Force Director of the Budget. What do you think about that? I looked at him and I thought to myself, I don't even write my own checks. My wife does. How can I be the director of the budget? I don't know anything about it. And I said, sir, I'm honored, but I'd rather be a commander. He said, well, that isn't in the cards right now. So on September 15th, 2001, 4 days after the planes hit the Pentagon and the towers, I PCSed from Ramstein to the Pentagon. And I'll never forget, the movers were at my house in Ramstein on September 11th. And then there were no planes flying except for military airplanes. So they put us on a KC-10 and we flew to McGuire Air Force Base, my old base. I rented a car with my wife, Leslie, and we drove down to the Pentagon. And the Pentagon was had been, part of it had been destroyed. And so on September 15th, 2001, in the infinite wisdom of the Air Force, they made Steve Lorenz the Air Force Director of the Budget. And I did that for 4 long years. I learned a lot in those 4 years. I learned how the process works, how the money is there, and how we do things in the government. And remember, this country is not 247 years old. It's 1 year old 247 times, because that's how they do the budget.
Budgets, exactly.
And so I did that for 4 years. And in those 4 years, my staff counted up, I ended up giving over this is not an exaggeration, 500 briefings on the 3rd floor to OSD, inside the glass doors at the Pentagon for the Air Force, White House, and Congress, and all over the country. So that's what we did for 4 years. And then I was blessed to go on to become the Air University Commander at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. Spent 3 years there. It was just magnificent. And once again, in the infinite wisdom of the Air Force, they made me the Air Force Commander of Air Education Training Command, and we moved to Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, which, by the way, my middle name is Randolph. I was named after the base.
No kidding.
Yes.
Full circle.
Yes.
And then when you retired, you moved back here?
Yes. I always say there are 3 reasons people move: job, location, and the final one is everybody does, for family. So I had 2 aging parents living here, my in-laws and my dad. And so we moved back here, and I was very blessed. Some people called me here and asked me to run the Air Force endowment in those days, and I did that for the USAF endowment for about, I did that for almost 5 years. And so we moved back here, and we love living here in Colorado Springs.
We all do. So this is the Heritage Minute special podcast. I like to focus on heritage for a bit. And specifically, I want to hone in on one of the fascinating aspects of history that you previously shared with me during your assignments at around the Air Force, at March Air Force Base, California, Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, possibly New Jersey. You've gotten to live in the quarters of some legendary Air Force pioneers. I wonder if you could share some of those stories with us.
Well, I'm a student of military history and specifically Air Force history. And so it was amazing in my career that I got to live at different bases that have so much heritage. And let's go with the first one here at the Air Force Academy, the Otis House. When I was Commandant of Cadets, that house is over 100 years old, and it's been the Commandant's house for many, since the beginning. And it was such a fascinating place to live, because you look at the plaque inside all the houses that have a lot of heritage, and the names of people that have lived there before you it's like a who's who of the United States Air Force. Then we went to Ramstein, as I said before, and then the Pentagon, and we lived in Bolling Air Force Base and in the housing there. And then they moved me to Maxwell. And the house at Maxwell, and now remember that all the houses in those time periods were built in the late 20s and 30s at Maxwell, Randolph, Hamilton, you name the bases, and there were the Army Air Corps bases. Anyway, so the Curry House is the house at Maxwell, and the commanders of Air University, they go all the way back to the Air Corps Tactical School in the 20s and 30s. It's another long list of people that were made Air Force history lived in those houses. And it's just amazing to think of all the people who have been in that house. And then when we went to Randolph, and we stayed in the Clark House, that's what it's called. And Randolph, of course, was also built in the 20s and 30s. And you think about all the people. But when I was a wing commander at March Air Force Base, once again, blessed, the 15th Air Force used to be at March, and they moved it out. And I was sent down there to command the 22nd Air Refueling Wing. And so I got to live in the Arnold House. And the Arnold House is right there on the parade field at March, built exact same time as the other houses at the other bases. And so I would read history books. And I'll never forget one time sitting in the living room, and I'm sitting by the fireplace, and I'm reading a book about Hap Arnold, who lived in that house. And it says that sometime in the early 30s, mid 30s, Arnold is sitting there talking to Toohey Spots and Ira Aker, and they're talking about the relative merits of the 50 caliber versus the 30 caliber machine gun. And they're talking about it while they're sitting down having a cup of coffee in front of the fireplace in the Arnold House. And I'm sitting there while I'm reading this book, and I'm saying, this has happened just right here. It's just amazing. What an honor and a privilege to be able to serve and to see where our history began and came from in the Air Corps and the Air Forces, and now the Space Force.
Oh, fascinating connection to the past. Speaking of which, earlier today you mentioned you got to attend a couple of historic pinnings on that I think maybe our listeners would like to hear about.
Well, as I said before, I was stationed in the Senate Liaison Office from 1983 to 1986, and I was blessed that I got to take a lot of congressional delegations. They're called CODELs all over the world, and one person I got to meet and get to know was Senator Barry Goldwater, who was chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee at the time, and from Arizona, and he had in 1964 run for president as a Republican nominee. Well, anyway, I'd take him all over, but he knew I liked history. Well, he had been working very hard to get Jimmy Doolittle and Ira Aker their fourth star, honorific in terms, but because both of them had been heroes during World War II, but had retired as lieutenant generals. Well, he finally arranged it. And so he knew I liked history, and so he let me escort him to the White House for General Doolittle and to the Pentagon for General Aker. And so I was blessed to be able to stand there when both men were pinned at different times in different locations. But I can still picture standing there watching Senator Goldwater and President Reagan pin on the stars for General Doolittle. It was quite an honor to be just in the same room.
Oh, great privilege. So you've written a really good book called Lorenz on Leadership. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny how that started. First of all, I advocate to all airmen, especially and space people today, to write. Okay, because airmen don't write as much as they should, like you see the other services do, write books and stuff. And so I'll never forget. I was the squadron commander of the 93rd Air Refueling Squadron at Castle Air Force Base in Merced, California. The base is now closed. And it was I was the squadron commander in the 93rd Air Refueling Squadron there, which was the schoolhouse for all tankers. And I'll never forget, and I do not know why I did this, but it was during an operational readiness inspection, an ORI, and it was during night, and I was sitting in a staff car monitoring the planes being generated for the ORI, and there was a break in the action, and for some reason I decided to write down some principles, not original with me, things that I had learned from other people, my bosses, reading military history and the like, some things that would make you a better leader. And I started writing that. And so the first time I wrote my first Lorenz on Leadership article was when I was a lieutenant colonel at Castle Air Force Base. And just so you know, I have kept a journal for over 50 years. And I'm not talking about a diary, a journal where I write things that happen. The weakest ink, a guy named Mark Twain said this, the weakest ink is stronger than the strongest memory. And so when you have something happen to you or some event, write it down because you will forget. You have a tendency to remember negative things, but you forget the positive things. And so I started writing things down. And so as time went on, I wrote articles. Now, if I may make a recommendation to all of you, especially in today's society, keep it short. Remember the same thing Twain said, if I had more time, my letter would have been shorter. Yes. And it's hard to write and be concise. It takes more time to do it than just writing things down and like. So organize your thoughts. But I strongly recommend that all airmen sit down and write because my thoughts on leadership are no different than your thoughts on leadership in the fact that you have experiences, you have done things. Write it down and make a difference in other people's lives.
Excellent advice and an excellent book. I recommend it to anyone who's looking for a good read. So now, of course, you continue to go above and beyond, still serving, this time as the president of the Falcon Foundation. Could you share a little bit about that important organization and how you came to run it?
Sure. Well, first of all, as I told you before, I ran the endowment for 5 years, and then for 4 or 5 years, I did other things, was a senior mentor at Stratcom and the like. But I'm a debtor. I owe this school. I was blessed to be able to go to it. So I got a call and said, would you be interested in being the president of the Falcon Foundation? And so I said, I came down and interviewed and got hired to do it. And one of the reasons I did it, probably the primary reason, is I should have been a Falcon Scholar or a prep school or somebody. I should have gone to another school to prepare myself because, as I stated before, I had so many challenging academic times here. So the Falcon Foundation gives the opportunity, and it's been around since 1958, for individuals who did not make the cut. They were qualified, but they were below the line, and then they get selected for the scholarship. And by the way, the admissions people pick them. We do not. And currently we're allowed to pick 65 a year to go to currently 5 different schools, and where they take courses in math and science and physics and calculus and English, and they practice the CFA, the physical fitness test, to get in the academy, and they have to retake their SATs and ACTs, and they apply again. And they have about, on average, a 97% chance of getting in the second time. And it's a very powerful way to help our academy and the Air Force, because Falcon Scholars have a tendency over history to do exceedingly well, both as cadets and as officers in the United States Air Force. including of the 6 graduates of this Air Force Academy who have currently been chiefs of staff. 2 of them are former Falcon Scholars. And so that it makes a difference. That 1 year of extra studying makes a difference.
Yeah, that definitely shows the value of the program. But incidentally, of course, you succeeded Lieutenant General Jay Kelly, who was a prior subject of a Heritage Minute special. In addition to the 2 chiefs, any other notable Falcon Scholar?
Well, there are many senior officers, but like, for instance, we just, General Bill Beggart, class of 1968, just spent 5 years as our chairman of our board. And the new chairman coming on is General Bill Looney Tunes, class of 1972, who was a Falcon Scholar. And so he's going to be chairman of our board. And I can hardly wait to take him out and show him the schools and have him talk to Falcon Scholars and show what can be accomplished if you never give up, never give up, never give up, and keep showing up. And so there have been many Falcon Scholars who've done a lot of great things for our Air Force and for our nation. But then guess what? A lot of Academy grads have all done very well too.
But again, when you consider these are people who may not have even made it in,
that's correct.
For them to succeed is remarkable. So, and again, just a testament to the program. So, how can our listeners support the Falcon Foundation?
Well, that's an excellent question. First of all, it costs each school charges a different amount of money for a scholarship, and so we spend between $600,000 and $650,000 a year paying for these scholarships all over the country. So if you'd like to donate, you can do it on one day here for the AOG, or just send a donation to the Falcon Foundation here at the Air Force Academy, and it will make a difference. I promise you that, to help one young person or 2 young people to get into the Air Force Academy and become great cadets and even greater officers.
Well, thank you for that. So we're just about out of time, and I'd like to get your final thoughts, General. But first, a word of thanks to our listeners, and to let all of you know that Heritage Minutes and Heritage Minutes specials are still available anytime at usafa.org/heritagehub. That's usafa.org/heritagehub. Heritage Minutes drop every week on Sundays in audio and video. Heritage Minutes specials like this one drop the first Sunday of every month. You can also find us by searching Heritage Minutes on YouTube, and you can catch the Today in Academy History every day on USAFA's KAFA radio station, 97.7 FM, the Academy, or listen live online at usafa.edu/radio. Okay, General, got to give you the chance to comment on your illustrious class, which, of course, you are extremely and justifiably proud, the class of 73.
Well, of course, I'm very proud of the illustrious class of 1973, but everybody should be proud of their class. This school is not 70 years old. It's 1 year old 70 times. And every year, 1,000 raging hormonal teenagers show up. And I like to say this: what was the toughest 4th class year there ever was? Everyone thinks that. The class of 59 thinks 60s had it easier than they did. Okay, it's all relative. Is it different today? Yes, but we're very proud of our class, the illustrious class of 1973, and we were blessed to serve at the time that we were able to serve. And we have a lot of people in our class that accomplished a lot, both in the military and in the civilian world, just like every other class is. But as I like to say, you are so lucky, Steve, to be a member of the second best class ever to go to this school.
Well, I appreciate that. So, and in fact, I wrote an article for Checkpoints about your class, which and you obviously excellent people, but you explained it was partly due to timing that several members of your class came of age right at the time that openings were developing. So many 4-star, 3-star leaders and not just in the Air Force, but outside as well. And I think of Sullenberger and other folks who've made their names.
Yes, we had a chief of staff, Nordy Schwartz, and we've had MAJCOM commanders, like different commanders and different leaders. And but I'm very proud of my class, and I will echo that over and over again. But I also want everyone to be proud of their class too, because every class serves our nation And it is we're all blessed to be able to serve. And what a great school we have that is a foundation which all of us started. And then we went on to do what we did.
Absolutely. Any final words for our audience?
No, I just want to say thanks to the AOG. Thanks to Steve Simon doing these Heritage Minutes, because it makes a difference for everyone to study our heritage, our history, about different people and what they're doing all over the country, all over the world, because the Academy has since it began in 1954, and then when the new first class of 1959 came out, the Academy has made a difference in the world.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
You've been listening to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Simon, USAFA class of 77. The Heritage Minute special is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation.